Welcome to this explainer. We're diving straight into a completely surreal, incredibly high-stakes standoff unfolding literally right now, in May 2026. We're going to look at how a supposed pause in the fighting completely broke down and, what the actual structural reasons behind that collapse really are.
I mean, just imagine the geopolitical whiplash here. You declare a brief ceasefire only to turn around and immediately issue this absolutely chilling ultimatum. The source details how what was supposed to be just a brief pause in hostilities for Russia's Victory Day celebrations instantly mutated into a massive threat of a missile strike aimed right at the very heart of Kyiv. It totally sets the stage for the dramatic collapse of a truce that incredibly didn't even manage to last 10 hours before the bombs started falling again.
Part 1. The dueling ceasefires. Let's dive right in and see how this so-called truce turned into a totally chaotic game of diplomatic chicken.
The sheer mess of this situation is just staggering. This definitely wasn't some coordinated mutual peace deal hammered out behind closed doors. Earlier in the week, Russia announced a unilateral ceasefire specifically for May 8th and 9th. This was to mark the 81st anniversary of the victory over Nazi Germany, and they called on Ukraine to follow their lead. But President Zelensky preempted the whole thing by declaring a Ukrainian ceasefire starting even earlier on May 6th. And the result? Total, absolute chaos. Between May 5th and 6th alone, Russia launched over 100 drones and several missiles at cities like Kharkiv.
So the contrast between the diplomatic messaging and the actual reality on the ground is night and day. While both sides were publicly talking up peace, President Zelensky reported over 1,800 violations in a single morning. That's a mind-boggling number. The physical reality of the conflict completely ignored the lines that were neatly drawn on those diplomatic calendars.
The source material actually highlights this as a textbook maneuver in modern information warfare. Think about it. When both sides declare overlapping, completely uncoordinated truces, it creates the perfect environment to just point fingers. The collapse of the truce itself becomes a tool to frame your opponent as the true aggressor on the global stage. Each side basically gets to point at the other and tell the international community, see, they don't actually want peace.
Which brings us to part 2, Red Square paranoia. And the crucial point we really have to ask here is, why is Moscow so intensely focused and honestly seemingly paranoid about this specific May 9th Victory Day window?
May 9th is the absolute biggest holiday on the Russian calendar, and it's always been heavily utilized as this massive symbol of strength. But look at the stark contrast we're seeing this year. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, Russia's biggest holiday parade is completely missing its heavy armor. There are no tanks rolling through Red Square, no massive missile carriers on display. Instead, reports indicate the whole thing is scaled way back to just military academies and an aircraft flyby. The official reasons cited by Russia? Security threats. And our source makes it clear they are taking those threats incredibly seriously.
The source explains that underneath President Zelensky's jokes about decreeing that Russia can hold its parade as long as they stay in their lane, there's a very real, tangible threat here. Ukrainian drones have been striking deeper and deeper into Russian territory than ever before. And Moscow is genuinely terrified that a cheap $500 Ukrainian drone could strike the Kremlin right while the entire world is watching the global broadcast of the parade. It's this classic asymmetric threat, and it completely disrupts that projected image of impenetrable strength. So to deter this exact nightmare scenario, Moscow issued a massive direct warning for foreign diplomats and civilians to evacuate Kyiv immediately. The threat they made is super explicit. If there is any disruption to the parade, Russia promises retaliatory strikes on decision-making centers situated right in the heart of the Ukrainian capital.
Let's move on to part 3, the 2026 strategic shift. We really need to step back from the parade itself for a second and explore the deeper structural factors and the military setbacks from April 2026 that are actually driving all this aggressive posturing.
The source details a pivotal structural shift on the battlefield that really provides the essential context for all of this. Recently, in April 2026, Russia suffered some pretty significant setbacks. Get this, for the first time in nearly 2 years, they actually lost ground. But it goes way beyond just territorial losses. Their communications infrastructure is actively failing. They lost access to Starlink, and the DIY satellite fixes they've been trying to piece together, those are actively being picked off and destroyed by Ukrainian scouts.
Because of these very tangible, very real struggles on the ground, that massive missile threat hanging over Kyiv is actually less about the parade itself and a lot more about what military analysts call strategic signaling. You see, when a military is struggling with territorial and technological losses, they often lean heavily on drastic public threats.
By threatening a massive strike on the capital, they're attempting to force Ukraine into a defensive posture. They are essentially trying to scare them into keeping those deep striking drones at home, hoping to regain this psychological upper hand.
And that leads us to part 4, high-stakes consequences. Bringing our focus back up to the surface level, we have to look at what these underlying structural shifts and diplomatic breakdowns actually mean for the immediate future.
The source really emphasizes that the next 48 hours are absolutely critical. All eyes are glued to both Red Square and Kyiv right now, and the situation poses some massive questions. Will Ukraine take the bait and risk a huge escalation by deploying drones during this window? Or, on the flip side, will those highly touted Oryeshnik missiles that Russia has been bragging about actually just stay in their silo?
As we analyze the strategy and the signaling, we've got to remember something important. While this all plays out like some grand geopolitical chess game on the world stage, the source rightly grounds us in the grim reality of the situation. This isn't just theory, right? It's a high-stakes poker game where the chips on the table are actual human lives and the very souls of two nations. The consequences of a miscalculation here are just devastatingly real.
To wrap up, I want to leave you with a really provocative thought, drawn directly from the source's analysis. Looking at how incredibly quickly this whole thing broke down and the intense informational warfare surrounding it all, do you think these unilateral declarations of a ceasefire are ever genuinely meant to bring peace? Or are they just purely strategic PR stunts designed to grab leverage on the international stage? It's a hugely complex question, for sure, but understanding the dynamics we've unpacked today is the first step in finding the answer. Thanks so much for joining me to explore this, and keep seeking to understand the why behind the headlines.